Okay, so we're going to switch gears now, and I want to go back into Premiere and talk about Premiere a little bit more. So I'm going to show a couple more, a little bit more about the tools in Premiere today, and then just to get you, so you understand the kind of the concept of how it works a little bit more. Right now, we've been using it just, I've been showing you how to edit, how to work from, assembly through edit, and then we'll talk about color and effects. We'll talk about effects today, but we'll talk about color and audio and graphics next week. But for now, what I want to talk more about is effects and transitions. So right now, I've just been doing cuts, right? If we look at this video, it's got the opening, he's walking, and we just cut from one shot to shot to shot. So how do you do a transition between shots? Well, the answer is you're going to go into the effect library. So if I go down to over here and look for an effect tab, if I don't see it up here, that means it's probably hidden. I just want to hit this little tab right here, and I'm going to go to effects. And now my effect palette is going to come up. So Premiere has a whole bunch of effects built in, and there's two ways to look at this. There's effects that are applied to a clip that affect the whole clip, and then there's transitions that are transitions between clips. And you think of that as like the cross dissolve, or the swipe, or any of those type of effects that we talked about. Those are considered transitions. And so if I look here, I'm going to see Lumina, you're going to see presets, Lumetri presets. We'll talk about those when we get into color correction. Audio effects, there's effects I can drop on audio transitions, but here we go. We got video effects and video transitions. So if I want to go and do a cross dissolve between, let's say I want to do a cross dissolve between these two shots right here. We'll go from here to here. I'm going to go down to video transitions, and you'll see there's a whole bunch in here. And so here's the thing. Premiere has an open architecture. So what that means is there's a bunch of plugins that come with it, transitions and effects that come just stock with Premiere, which are pretty good. But there's also a bunch of third-party ones you can buy, and some of them you can get for free that you can install in Premiere. They give you extra functionality. So for example, this one that says Film Factory Pro is a bunch of effects that are a third party that I installed. And they behave the same way. Also, let me see what else in here. I've got Red Giant Universe, but I think that expired, so it won't work right now. But I have a bunch of plugins in here. But let's go for dissolve. So I want to do a cross dissolve here. Well, I'm going to go to dissolve here, open it up, and I've got a bunch here. So I've got additive dissolve, I've got cross dissolve, dip to black, dip to white, film transition, and a bunch here, and morph cut. So we'll talk about this one. So the one that I normally use is cross dissolve. So I'm going to do a cross dissolve. Here's the one I'm going to grab. I'm just going to grab it. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to zoom in the timeline just a little bit so we can see better. And I'm going to make these icons just a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so here's my edit point right here. So I want to put a cross dissolve here. So I'm going to grab the cross dissolve, and I'm just going to drag it over and drop it on there. And then once I do that, now if I hit play, first of all, look, there's a little square here that says cross dissolve. So now you know that there's a transition between these two shots. And when I hit the space bar, it's going to fade between the two. But notice how it changed the pacing, right? Before, it was just a cut, like watch the beginning of this. We go from here, we cut to there. It's very instantaneous. Watch what happens with the dissolve now. It's not instantaneous. It feels like time has passed. And that's the nature of a cross dissolve. It's not instant. It doesn't feel immediate. So a lot of times people just drop cross dissolves in all their shots. And that's kind of a beginner rookie mistake, because you want to use a cross dissolve when it feels right, not just to have an effect and drop it in. Lots of people, once they start playing around with transitions and effects, just go to town and go crazy. And their videos just full of cross dissolves and weird transitions, anything. And then it starts feeling not as professional. So you still want to stick with the cut unless there's a reason to do a cross dissolve. What other ones have I got here? Well, I've got dip to black. Let's see what that one looks like. If I grab a dip to black, put it here. Let's see what it does. Ooh, see that? It's a different type of transition. It fades to black and then immediately comes back up. So these are good for like moments when you're flashbacking, like if you want to dip under, like, you know, sometimes they use them when people are passing out and falling asleep, they go dip to black. You can dip to black between scenes. And a lot of times we use it a lot in music videos. We use the dip to black, and if it feels right with the music, we can drop it in there. So you have to feel it and see if it works or not. So another one is, well, let's go dip to white, which is the opposite. So let's go on that one. That one's going to dip to white. So it's kind of the opposite. Delete that one for a second. Film dissolve, well, it's like a dissolve, so kind of keep it there. There's other stuff in here we can look at. So there's page peels, there's slides, there's wipes. Let's look at wipes. So I got white barn doors. Let's drop that in. Oh, there you go. There's a wipe. Don't use them too much. But one thing to notice, look at the bar above the timeline here. So normally it's yellow or green. If it's green, that means everything is like rendered and can play no problem. Yellow means that the timeline is being rendered on the fly by your graphic processor, but it's still okay. Red means, well, this is gonna, the graphic processor will process it, but it may drop frames. So whenever I get red, it should be okay. But if I get to a point where these transitions are just stuttery, and it's going to be hard to do on my computer because it's pretty fast, and we're using pretty, you know, just 1080 footage. If I use 6K, it might break down a little bit more. But if I have too much red in the timeline and it starts breaking up into shots, I could render this out. So how do I do it? Well, if I want to render out this effect, I'm going to go up here to sequence and render effects to out, or render selection. So I'm going to hit render selection. And when I do that, it's going to render it and turn green. Now I'm going to say I didn't need to do it because it's not going to, there's no difference really in playback, whether it's green or red. But if you start getting dropouts, if you start doing color correction and your video timeline starts slowing down to a crawl and you see a lot of red in there, it probably means you need to render out the timeline. So what it's going to do is it's actually going to render it all out, save it to little temporary video files and play that instead. And then, but it'll look exactly like what's in your timeline. So it's a great way if you start bogging down your computer, you have like a multi-layered effect going on and your computer can't handle it, just render it out and then it'll be able to play it without a problem. So I'm going to delete this one. Let me go back to the cross dissolve for a second. Okay. So I've dropped it in there. If I click on it once, it's going to give me these controls. Effect, you see up here, it says effect controls, and I can see the duration of it. I can go down here also and just grab the end of it and drag it out. And as I drag it out, it'll tell me the duration of it. So if I want it to be a bigger cross dissolve, so like say to here, double the size, just drag it out and then hit play. See, it's a much longer cross dissolve. Likewise, if I want to shorten it, I can make it even smaller like that. And let's make it a really tiny cross dissolve. Super fast, right? I think the default is like 3 seconds. Let's see. So what I normally do is just drop a cross dissolve in. Yeah, it's about a second cross dissolve. About 2 seconds, I think. And if I want to change it, I can change it. I can stretch it out. I can also offset it. I can slide it over so that the cross dissolve is not perfectly balanced between the two shots. It might start quicker and end longer. Start quicker on the first shot and longer on the second shot. So normally I just kind of keep it in the center, but you can move it around. So these are pretty flexible tools for doing transitions. And so there's cross dissolves, there's wipes, slides, there's a whole bunch of them in here, page peels, irises. To me, most of these are gimmicks. They're more like what people used to use for wedding videography in the 90s and early 2000s. So I think they're just kind of legacy stuff from, you know, Premiere from those days. Most films you watch either are going to do a regular dissolve or something else. Somebody else, can you ask to control the amount of time the transition lasts? Yep. Yeah, that's what I'm showing. Okay, so just make sure I'm not falling behind on those questions. So you can change it there. So I can bring it here, drop it in normal, double click on it. I can actually just type it in. So here it's 1.6 seconds. I can say, okay, let's make it 3 seconds. There, it just changed. Now it's way too big for the thing. So it's not going to work. So I found the easiest way to do it is to grab it, drop it in there, and just drag it out like this and get a feel for what you want to do. And then play it. So I'll sit there, start here, play it. Okay, I'll go, wait, that's way too long. Bring it down, go back, play again. Even a little too long. Yeah, okay, that feels better. So that's a transition. And so whether it's page turn, barn doors, whatever it is, they all behave the same way. So once you learn how to do the cross dissolve, they all follow the same thing. So right clicking. Yeah, so if you right click, if you want, you can set transition duration there, or you can clear it. If you want to get rid of it. Again, Premiere has multiple ways of working. I just kind of use my mouse when I'm doing it. So that's going to be a transition. So the next thing I want to talk about is, oh, there's some 3D motion in here too you could play around with that are like cube flips and stuff. So they're, again, these are kind of, to me, gimmicky. I'll show you one real quick. See, it turns red. That means it's going to have a lot of processing. Kind of weird. You know, I'm not a big fan of all those type of transitions. If I click on this one, you could see that now I have more control over it. I can show the actual effects. I could reverse it, you know, but I really don't play around with these too much because I don't know, they don't work for me. So that's transition. Now an effect, everybody good on the transition so far? Any questions?
Oh yeah. On my timeline, because I'm trying to look at it as you're doing it so that I can understand. Where you were talking about whether it's red, green, or yellow, that's not on mine. Like
Well,
there's
then
no color up there at all.
there's no color.
No, it doesn't look like that.
Maybe you've got a fast enough machine where it doesn't need to render it at all. But basically what this says is that you got to render something. So it might be that your footage is in a format there that works fine, and it doesn't even need to be anything to be done.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's probably what it is. Here I'm using this is a higher end camera, so the codec might be a little bit different, and so Premiere might want to render it out at some point. But even if it's yellow is fine. It's just when it gets to red, and you saw even when it was red, like my computer still played it fine, but it's just telling you that might be potential to be rendered out. And it really comes into play. You'll see it when you do such complicated color correction and effects and everything that your playhead speed just slows down, and like drops frames. When you start seeing frames drop, then you probably will see this little color on the top, and then it's probably telling you want to render. And again, if you want to render something out to make it smooth, you're going to go up here and either hit render to out, render selection, or render effects to out. One of these will get it. Usually it's the return key. So usually if something needs to be rendered, I'm going to hit the return key and it'll render it out. Here I hit the return key, it's just playing from the beginning. So it really doesn't need to render anything.
Okay, and then just one other thing. Right now, what you're showing us, these transitions, this wouldn't be on our first timeline, right? The first timeline is just the clips that we want, and then we save that, and then the next one that we do, we start adding transitions, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's my rule of thumb. I would say the first one, which is the assembly, the string out, you wouldn't put transitions. Then when you start moving on to the work print or the fine cut, work print, I would be dropping transitions in, and then fine cuts where I'm just super tweaking everything.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and again, just this whole idea of working in your timeline in different stages. I'm going to tell you another example from another student who I was helping the other day, who was from last semester. She was just throwing everything in the timeline and working, and she couldn't get. I'd see her every week, and she wasn't making any progress because the reason why she was so caught in the fine edits of everything that she couldn't just get the timeline out in front of her. And so it was just literally stopping her. She was like basically looking at each individual tree and not stepping back and looking at the forest. And that's the whole point of doing it this way, where I start off with a rough cut, then, assembly, then a rough cut, and then a work print, or fine cut, and then finally then go to color correction and all this. If I just sit there and deal with each microscopic piece and work through it, I'm never going to get it done right because I'm never going to see everything. So by getting it all down in big chunks and then whittling it down and working it down to its fine elements, final form, that's to me, the most efficient way. And that's also the way that most people work. So think about, TV shows and movies. If I'm working on a TV show and I'm the editor, the producer, the director is going to say, okay, I want to see a rough cut in a week. You're like, all right, well, I'm going to do the rough cut. That means it's rough. It means it's just the idea coming across. So it makes sense, because what you don't want to do is, if you're working with other people, if you're by yourself, then maybe you can just do it that way and get it done a little bit at a time. But if you're working on a team and you've got someone who's your boss that's saying, okay, I need to approve your work progress as you go, I don't want to do a whole fine cut and then they're like, man, this thing sucks, I don't like it, let's go back and do something different. I just wasted all this time. So by doing the rough cut first, then I get notes, I apply those notes as I do the work print, show them that version, get more notes. As I'm refining the thing, I'm not wasting time, I'm being more efficient. So there is a madness behind that, this whole philosophy of working in different stages throughout the edit, if that makes sense to everybody. All right, so jumping back to these effects. So those are transitions. So if I want to do an effect, well, now I'm going to go to this effect folder here and jump on that. Now, the other thing you can do, like there's so many effects in here, and once you add like plugins and everything, it can get massive and out of order. So a shortcut is I can go up here where this little magnifying glass is, and let's just say I'm going to type dissolve. If I do that, all my dissolves are going to show up and I can see them. So here I've got, photo montage, blur dissolve. Here I've got transition, which is a block dissolve. Now I've got normal dissolves. So if I want to find something in all the hundreds of effects and transitions, I can just type something and it comes up. If I know where it is, I'm just going to go for it. So video effects. So video effects are applied to the whole clip. So there's a whole ton of them here. There's some third-party ones. So these are for when I want to do something to it. So in part of the color correction is going to be applying the Lumetri effect on your clips to do color correction. But we'll get to that when we talk about color correction. So let me find something that's kind of, I don't know, interesting or maybe not so interesting. So stylized, let's look at stylized. Okay, posterized, let's try that. So I'm going to take it and now I'm going to drop it and now it comes on the whole clip. And now you can see I've just kind of reduced the colors down. It looks kind of, it's not the greatest effect in the world, but it certainly does something that you can see. So the other thing too is up here, I'm going to have effect controls. So once I start going into effects and I really want to start working with effects in here, and maybe I'm doing the effects somewhere in the work print, right? Or maybe I'm doing it in the fine cut, but probably in the work print areas when I'm going to start dropping effects in here. Just like I have a workspace for editing, workspace for assembly. Well, I've got one for effects too. So I'm going to click on that. So in this new mode, they put all your effect palettes here. So now everything's out here. So now if I want to jump into any transitions, they're right here. I want to go to video effects. Well, here's all my video effects. So let's look. So we use this one. So that's kind of boring. Film emulation. No, that one will be hard. That'll crunch it down. Okay, here we go. So here's a black and white one. So we want to drop and make this black and white. Drop it in there, made it black and white. So all these controls, these are all in the clip. So here's the deal. I can put as many of these effects in each clip. So right now, these two, if you look, there's a little purple little icon right here. That little purple icon lit up means that there's some type of effect on this clip. So how do I know what's on there? Well, if I double click the clip, it's going to come into the timeline, right? And then if I go up here and go to this tab here that says effect controls, hit that, it's going to give me all the controls for the effects and also for the clip itself. So here's where I'm going to do all the manipulation of what's happening on this clip down here. And I click on this one, every clip I click on, it's going to show me what's happening in there. So when I look here, I've got black and white. So if I click this, I can disable it. I can turn it back on. If I don't want it, I can right click and hit clear and get rid of it. So just because I put the clip in, the effect on the clip doesn't, I have control of it here. So same thing here. If I double click this, well, here's my posterized effect right here. And here's the level. If I want to change the level on it, well, I can make it a little weirder. I can make it even more surreal like this, make it almost abstract or old 80s MTV music video maybe. If I don't like it, I can hit clear. So a lot of the cool effects you see on videos and stuff are done primarily by third-party plugins. So if I go here, so for example, if I go to Film Effect Pro Glow, let's try this one, see what it looks like bloom. So it's going to give me the trial here. And this one's not too interesting because actually you can see it on the lighting a little bit. It's kind of blowing out the lighting down there. Not too interested in this one, so I'll clear it. Let's pick another one. Analog TV, let's take a look at that one. So now it kind of shapes it a little bit like TV. And once I drop it in here, you can see all this extra controls show up here, and it says Film Factory. So here, if I wanted to really mess around with this, I can change the distortion of it. It should play like a, yeah, it's got that weird little glitch in it. So that's all from a plugin, this Film Effect Analog TV plugin. So again, if I don't want it, I'm just going to hit clear, get rid of it. So this is kind of how effects work in Premiere. I'm going to drop it on the clip, and then up here in effect controls are going to be all the controls for it. Some plugins have a separate window that pop up. It all depends on how the plugin is built and worked. So some can do certain things, others just work with what's happening in here. Let's try one more, see if something interesting in here. Try the Pro Glow. Let's try light rays. Yeah, look at that. That's kind of cool. So we're doing some effects where, they're going into the light, right? And get these cool light rays happening here. And of course, you got to pay for these. You can see right now it says Film Effect Factory Pro on there, a watermark on there. these are all, you have to purchase type of plugins. I mean, they're not, some of them are expensive, some of them are not, it all depends. There are some plugins out there that are industry standard that work on Avid, Final Cut, Premiere, Resolve, that run in thousands of dollars. There's one to get all the Boris Effect plugins, you're looking at like $5,000 to $6,000 for the plugins. So they can get really, really expensive. You can get caught up in spending all this money on plugins when the majority of it you don't need. Like I have a handful of plugins that I use and that's it. The main ones that I use are for doing film emulation, for color correction, and sometimes for a little bit of special effects and compositing. That's about it. I don't go all the way into all the other stuff. I used to use Magic Bullet all the time, which was really good for color correction, but now I've even moved on from that. In fact, if anything, I'm going the opposite direction where I'm doing less and less plugins. So again, I can hit this little button here where it says effects and turn it on and off so I can see what it's looking like. And if I wanted to stack another one in here, let's put one more on. Okay, so I got this one here. Let's go with something that color correction, distort. Gamma correction, generate. Let's see, generate 4 color. Lens flare. Let's drop lens flare in. Okay, so here we go. Here's a lens flare. I'm going to turn off the. So if I want to add a lens flare, let's say I got a lens flare coming in from there. Now I just added a lens flare and I could change it. So if I wanted to move the flare around, I want to change the brightness of it. I can change the type, what type of lens it is that's flaring. Kind of like the first one. And then I could, if I wanted to, I can put the other effect on too. So now I've got 2 effects here, and maybe the order that I put them in. So these are, top down. So if I wanted to, I could move this effect on top of the other effect. Doesn't work as good. I think it works better the other way. So I'm going to put it back there. And now if I play this, you can see it turned red, but it's like my computer's still handling it. It's still playing it. So I could start adding more and more stuff in here to make my, video cooler, I guess, or maybe more if the thing with effects is I'm only going to apply effects that really dictate or support the story. I'm not just going to throw them in there for the sake of throwing them in there like I just did and go, oh wow, this looks cool. Look, he's walking here and then he walks into the light. Awesome. Well, yeah, it doesn't help the story too much, but it certainly could be cool. So I'm going to clear it, get rid of this lens flare, and let's get rid of these lights, light rays. Oh, get in there, clear. So you have to make sure you're on the clip. So what was happening is my playhead went past the clip and I was trying to access this and it wasn't letting me do it. So you want to make sure the clip you're highlighted on, and I usually keep the playhead on there so I can see it. And then I'm going to cut it, clear it. Okay, so back to normal here. Get this out of here. So you can go in there and explore and see what you have. This is, again, like I said before, this is going to be the basis of how we do color correction in Premiere, but a little more advanced. So what is all this stuff? So if I just click on one of these shots, you're going to see here in the effect controls that there's all these controls here, but I didn't drop any effects into it. So what are these? Well, these are going to be motion effects and opacity effects that each clip has built in. So what does that mean? Well, let's go back to this clip, play around with this. So the first one's going to be position and scale. So I'm going to use these clips as an example. So let me go back to editing for a minute so we can see a little bit better. I'm going to make these just a little bit smaller. Okay, So here's another thing about the timeline. So the bottom layer is, think of it as paper. This is a piece of paper on the bottom layer. And then video 2 is the next layer. And I'm going to put something on top of that. Remember how we showed you with editing, how if I put this clip on top, it becomes an edit. So now if I do this up, it's going to edit to him falling asleep, right? And then if I move it out of the way, well, now the video is clear. So you can use these for editing, but you also can use them for compositing. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to move this one out of the way for a moment. So I have this piece of video on top right here on this track, video track 2. If I click on it, now I have the edit controls for this piece of video. And if I go up here, I have some controls that are called motion. So the first one is position. The second one is scale. I'm going to start with scale first. So I'm going to grab, if you notice, there's 100. It says 100% right here. If I click on it, look, when I hover my mouse over it, it turns into a finger with a left and a right. So if I grab this and start dragging it, the number smaller, look what happens to the video. It starts scaling and resizing. And not only that, but whatever's underneath it starts showing through, just like a piece of paper on top of another piece of paper. So now I can play this, and I've got 2 pieces of video happening at once. So that's the first thing you can do with this. The second thing is position. So now I've got this, let's say I want to make a lower third or a graphic. You already watch the news and the anchor comes on and says, good evening, today's top story is so-and-so, and over the shoulder is a piece of video being played. This is what they're doing. They're rescaling the video and overlapping it on top of another piece of video. But in the center here is not that good. So maybe I want to move it over to the corner here. How do I do that? Well, if I go up here where it says position, there's 2 numbers, an X and a Y coordinate. So if I grab one of these, well, now I can move it up and down. So I'm going to move it up like that. And then the next one, well, I could slide it around. So now I'm going to slide it over to here. And now if I hit play, again, you know, this is kind of sloppy because these 2 pieces of video don't connect at all or mean anything with each other. I hit play. Suddenly I cut to that shot. I've got this 2 overlapping shots. So what I've done is made a composite. This is called compositing. I'm compositing one piece of video on top of another piece of video. So in compositing, we could be just using video and dropping them on top of each other. I could use graphics and do composite graphics on top of one another. I could have special effects that I composite in there. This is the basis of all effects work that you see in Hollywood. We're taking one thing shot one other place, dropping it in or blending it in with the other one. So now I've got this piece of video here. Okay, great. So maybe it cuts in nicely like that, but maybe I want it to fade out. Maybe I want it to dissolve out. How do I do that? Well, I could try and put a dissolve in there. So let's try that. So I'm going to go out of video effects. And remember, the video effects are now down here because I went back to editing. If I went back to effects, the video effects would be here. So I use this for when I'm doing more compositing and stuff, but whenever I'm just editing and dropping effects and everything, I just stay in editing because that's what I'm used to. So I'm just gonna flip the tab here from between, here's my browser, media browser to effects. If I wanted to, I could just grab this and drag it next to media browser so they're right next to each other if I want to jump back and forth. Or let's go to project. So I'll drag it next to project. So then I can jump between those, the browser, and all that stuff. So let's go to transitions. Audio, no, I want video. So go back to dissolve, cross dissolve. I'm gonna drop it on there. It doesn't quite work, does it? Let's see. Yep. So what the way, and you're like, well, how come it didn't go between 2 things? And the answer is there's nothing here for it to cross dissolve to. So if you drop a cross dissolve on this clip, it's just going to dissolve or fade out from itself because there's nothing for it to cross to. If I wanted to, I could add something. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go back to my bin here. I'm going to create new black video. So actually, that's not going to work either because it's going to be, if I want it to fade out. So no, I'm just going to leave it as is. But that kind of works. So I can fade it out that way. But I don't even have to use this if I don't want to. I don't have to use a transition. You're like, well, how do you do that? Well, check this out. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. But do you see this line here going across the top here? That's called an opacity line. And that's basically how bright this is. So or how transparent this shot is. So right now when it's all the way up, it's just full on. So that means when I cut from this shot to this shot, it just cuts. But watch what happens if I grab it and drag it halfway. You notice how they blended? Now they're starting to blend. Now that might be good for some type of weird effect or not, but for this, it doesn't quite work. But watch this. If I hold down the command key, I think it's control on Windows, I'm going to make that little dot there. Now there's another dot here, and now I'm going to grab and I'm going to stretch it down like that. And what I've done is done a fade up, a ramp up. Now watch this. You see how it just faded up? So now I faded it up, and let's say I want to fade it out. Well, I can do the same thing. I'm going to hit Control or Command, make a dot, and then make another dot, and then drag that dot down. So watch what's going to happen. So it's going to start at 0, fully transparent, and it's going to go up to 0 transparency, then back down to fully transparent. Fade in and fade out. So I like using these for when I'm doing like composites and I want to fade something up and down instead of putting an effect on, because it kind of, to me, I can kind of customize it a little bit better. If I want to stretch this out a little bit more, to me, it's even easier. Watch when I do this, I can stretch it that way. And then when you play, it's going to be a longer fade in. And then a shorter fade out. I'm just going to kind of put it back to here. So the other thing too is now I have this other piece of video. So now I can take this piece of video, put it on top of this piece of video. Let me just stretch it out a little bit. Now if I hit play right now, it's just going to behave like an edit, right? Because this is blocking all of what's underneath it. So what do I want to do? Well, the first thing I may want to do is go to the effect controls. So I double click this, go up here, hit effect controls right here. Okay, let me position it. So I'm going to resize it. First of all, I want to scale it. So I may want to see what the scale of this one is and match it. So if I double click this one, go back to effect controls and look at scale, that's at 48%. So now when I go back here, I'm going to hit effect, and here I'm just going to double click it and I'm going to type 48. And now it's the same size as that one. So now I've done that. Now I'm going to bring it over to the edge and then bring it up. And now I may decide, well, I want to do a fade in with it too. So I'll hit the space bar and zoom in just a little bit here. So I can see where this keyframe is. So it's right there. So I might move this onto my playhead. Then I'm going to hit Command Alt, make one right there, and then grab this one and drag it down too. So now they both should fade up exactly the same. Let's see. Here you go. Now I could put that little cross dissolve here if I want to and do it that way, but like I said, I kind of like using these keyframes and using the opacity curve to do it. So here, now I'm going to go, okay, I want to fade out here. So I'm going to put my playhead there, and I've got a node right here. So I'm just going to bring it right there. And then make another one here. So I'm going to hit Command, make that dot, and then bring it down. And now I'm going to zoom back out so I can see this a little bit better. And voila, they both fade up and out. So that's like simple compositing and some kind of effects you can do. And that's just dealing with the position and the scale up here. What else can I do up here? Well, let's play around with this one. So if we go to the next ones, I've got rotation, anchor point, anti-flicker filter. So anti-flicker is if it's starting to flicker and feel a little weird, you can use that to kind of cut it down. But rotation, let's play around with that. So if I grab this one, oh, look, I can spin it around. I can turn it sideways. Okay, interesting. What else could I do with that? So let me put it back to normal. So I'm going to hit this little reset here, reset parameter. Right? All these little resets here, if I do something like this, where I messed it up and I just want to go back to the way it originally was, I can just hit the reset button here and it'll put it back to the way it was. If I hit these up here, I will reset the scale and the positioning that I just played around with, but I don't want to touch that right now. But if whatever I'm working in this window, I have to be highlighted. See, I've got a white outline on this clip. That's what I'm working on. See how that one changed? So I go back to this one. I can rotate it. I can do whatever. So I have to be on the clip depending on what I want to do. So rotation lets me spin it around. Anchor point, I can change the anchor point of where the spin happens. So these two, opacity, we kind of talked about it already here by drawing an opacity curve, but I'm going to show you something else that's kind of cool with it. And that's going to be doing what's known as a garbage matte. So again, I don't have like a good reason to do it here except to show you what a garbage matte is. And I'm going to do it on this first piece of video here. So let's say I just want him to be cut out. I don't want this to be a square. I want it to be something else. Well, I'm going to go down to where it says opacity, hit the drop down, and you're going to see that I've got some controls here. I've got a little elliptical mask, I've got a polygon mask, and I've got a free draw. I'm going to use the free draw. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to make my screen just a little bit smaller so I can see everything. Oh, wrong way. No, really wrong way. Really, it's the only choice I get. Oh, 25, that's what I'm looking for. So now I'm going to start up here and I'm going to draw some points. Hang on, I hit the wrong. There we go. Why are you acting wacky? Okay, I've locked it in. Now let me go back and fill the screen again. So notice that I just cut him out. So by using this tool, I could cut him out. And again, this is really sloppy. I can grab these points and kind of move them around like this to reshape them to how I want it to be shaped. I can soften it up a little bit to blur it a little bit. I have quite a bit of control with this thing. I can rearrange it like this. But this is kind of one of the ways that we do something called rotoscoping. Let me go back to editing, where it's a little bit bigger. Where if I want to cut something out and then put it in another piece of video, and you see that all in special effect movies and everything. This is what they're doing. They're literally drawing this is what rotoscoping is. They're going to draw, instead of being a big mask like this, if I was doing it for real, I would zoom in to him and actually cut him out like this. And they make high-end software that does it for you to help you out a lot. But now when I hit play, he's just going to fade up like that. So instead of just having the video in that shape, I can do this. In fact, if I want to, let me get rid of it. If you look down here, you see I've made a mask. So I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to hit clear, get rid of it. Now we're back to normal. Now if I grab the oval, now I've got an oval. They can stretch out. And let's say I'm going to soften, I'm going to feather it up. This is the feathering function right here. Feathers it out, and then I'm going to expand it just a little bit. Maybe too much of a feather. Let's try that. Okay, so now when I hit play, he comes in a little bit more of a blur, a little bit more of a distorted thing, not just square like he is, like our student sitting there on the right. So these are pretty powerful tools for you to do compositing, split screens, effect shots. And again, I'm doing it really rough and crude here. There's no rhyme or reason here. I'm just purely demonstrative purposes, but this is what we do. So I could do chroma key work. So like we saw that video where the guy's, sitting, on the homeless guy sitting on the Hollywood street with the motion, slow motion or high speed time lapse shot in the background. I composited him in by not doing this, but by using a green screen technology, which means I put him in front of a piece of green, shot him, and then I took the green and removed it, and that made it transparent. And that's something that's done in movies all the time. And I'm sure you know about it. Most special effects you see where someone's floating in space or they're flying, your superheroes are flying, they're usually being shot against a green screen and being composited in somewhere. So what we're looking at here is like super rough compositing, like the 101 of here's how you composite something. So here I'm controlling the opacity level of my shot. Here I'm controlling a garbage mat of how much stuff I want to see and not see. And here it's just the video on its own. So could I soften this up a little bit more? Yeah, let's work on this one now. So I'm going to highlight that clip. I'm going to go to opacity, and this time I'm going to grab a square. And I'm going to drag it to each corner of my video. And now I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so I can see beyond the screen. Okay, so now I'm going to soften the edges. And let's go back to full size. And let's take a look. Let's see what it looks like. It could be a little softer, I think. I can also rotate it. There's plenty of things I can do. My mouse, if you grab it the wrong way, it wants to rotate. So let's see what that one looks like. So soften, it probably could be more, I could soften it even more, playing around with it. Probably bring these back. So now you see I've taken it from being just regular squares of video. One's rounded and kind of blurry, and this one's still a rectangle, but a little more blurry. So it kind of blends in a little bit more in the composite. So these can be good for effects. Like if you're trying to do something cool and effecty in your film, you could do it. People use them for doing videos about instructional videos or tutorials. You could see them in music videos. People do stuff like you might be inspired to do something like this and have a transition or a composite in your music video for a scene. Maybe someone's singing about being happy or something, and you have your actor lip syncing, and you want to put them against a bright blue happy sky, and maybe they were shot against a white wall. You could kind of use these techniques to kind of blend them in and make it happen. Any questions so far?
No, it just seems like there's almost an unlimited amount of options on this thing.
There is, there's a huge amount of potential here. And we haven't even discussed, and we are not going to discuss, going into Adobe After Effects. So all the compositing stuff you do here is like, what I'd say is like entry-level compositing. Yeah, Premiere can do it. Does it do it great? That does it okay. But if I really want to do stuff like this, even more advanced effect work, I could send my project right into After Effects. So let's just say this shot right here, I want to work in After Effects. Well, I can right click it and then go down to, where is it? They moved it around, show, speed grade, enable, replace with After Effect composite. And this will literally take this clip, write it out to an After Effect file, load up After Effects, and then I can start manipulating this in After Effects. And whatever I do in After Effects will just reflect in the timeline automatically. It's really powerful technique. So, if you're doing super, it could be something, let's say you have a scene where you have someone firing a gun, but you have a fake gun and you don't want to have real bullets, which because of what, definitely what happened recently, we don't want to be playing around with that stuff. I can take that shot of the gun firing, send it to After Effects, and there's plenty of plugins that do bullet, gunfire muzzle explosions and stuff. Drop it in there, and suddenly have a realistic looking gunfire, and without having a real bullet or anything on set, just by working in and out of Premiere and After Effects. So these tools, when you look at them individually, they can be very daunting. But once you get to know them more, and then you start exploring how they interact with each other, you can quickly realize how incredibly powerful this platform is for content creation, whether it's movies, videos, music videos, YouTube, whatever. It really is pretty amazing. And they're all there. I mean, if you look at Resolve kind of has the same setup, but instead of going out to third party, going out into like After Effects, it has After Effects built into it in the form of something called Fusion. So I can do all that in Resolve too. Premiere has motion. I'm not in Premiere, I mean, Final Cut Pro has motion where I can send it out and do stuff in motion. There's plenty, all of these platforms, these editing platforms have been slowly integrating more and more special effects, compositing effects, all this stuff that you would normally have to go out to a specialized piece of software are now able to do it. Some of these third-party plugins that you can buy can do this stuff automatically for you. So if I go to my plugins, my effects, and go down to some of these, like specifically, if I go down to, let me go to transitions, let me go to video effects. So Red Giant Universe is a huge amount of compositing software. That Red Giant Effects, right here we go, right here. So I can use this to do optical glow. I can create bullets. I can do advanced keying. There's a huge amount of resources out there that just will bring the stuff into Premiere and allow you to even do more stuff. But in the beginning, when you're first starting out, that's all overkill. That can just fry your brain. Believe me, for me, it fried my brain. And even to this day, sometimes I'm trying to work with these third-party plugins, and I think I understand them. I realize I don't know as much as I think I do, and I'm like, wow, okay, that is a little bit above my pay scale. I don't really understand how to do this. And that's how, that's the beauty of the system, that you can make it as complicated as you want or as simple as you want just by incorporating other third-party plugins, going into After Effects or whatever. So what I really like about it is that this system, this platform can be simple in the beginning. It can start very simple and you can just get to learn how to use it and edit in it, but then it will grow with you and expand to whatever you really want to do. Can you do chroma key? You sure can. It does not have to be After Effects. In fact, if I had a chroma key shot here, I would show you, but I don't have anything with me. But if I go down to effects, in fact, let's just type chroma key. The best way to explore effects is to type something you think. So chroma key. So what do we got? I got blue chroma. Red giant chroma key. Let me just delete it. They must call it something else. Distort, channel, color completion, film emulation, King. Here we go. So I go to King. I got alpha. I've got color key. So I could use a color key. So in fact, I can probably color key this thing. So let me try it. Let's try it for the heck of it. So I'm going to go to opacity. I'm going to get rid of my mask. In fact, I'm just going to reset all this. And now I'm going to try color key first. Probably Luma key is what we'll be able to do with this. But if I go chroma key, drop it in here. Now I grab this, watch what happens. I'm gonna chroma key his shirt. Not the best thing, but you could see that he's the image is happening behind him because I'm chroma keying his jacket. If I had a real chroma key back here, it would work, but I'm going to show you another type of keying that'll probably work here because he's against a white background. So if I grab Luma key, that may do it. Maybe not. Not as much as I thought it would. Almost. Not quite, not design. You really need a chroma key, but you can see I'm trying to separate the background, him from the background. Not working that well because he looks more like a ghosting image here. But you can do full keying, and if you have it set up right with the right chroma key, you can definitely pull it off.
You have certain transition requirements that we have to do editing wise.
I do, yeah.
And I was just wondering which effects would be good for the specific, like for instance, like if we have to do a smash cut, would there be a better effect for that than another one? Or
well, a smash cut, is really more about the shots that you edit together. Like if you remember the example I did with Shaun of the Dead, I think.
Right, and the sound is kind of, at least for that one, is kind of exaggerated, right?
Right. So you could do that. I mean, sometimes you could do a transition from a fade to white or fade to black really fast. There's a couple, it's not really about the effect. The only one that really has an effect in it, a transition, would be a dissolve, like a cross dissolve or barn door or fade to black, a dip to black. Any of those are like specific transition related. Some of the other ones are not, like smash cut, match cut edit is, that's just matching two different shots, right? So it has really nothing to do with transitions. but you can combine transitions to do something that may come to like a, you know, a smash cut, something like that. Well, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's as much as I want to talk about today, because I think that's already a lot of information. So besides starting to, so what you need to do, you know, over this extended weekend, to start thinking about, well, you got three things to do. First, you got to make sure where you're at, wherever you're at with the first video that you're either shooting. Hopefully you've gotten your green light. If you haven't, well, I got to hear from you. If I don't hear from you, then I can't give you a green light. And so your clock is seriously running out. So you want to make sure you're get it done, because the due date's in a couple weeks. The second thing is you want to make sure, start thinking about the next assignment. What is that piece of music I want to use? What is the ideas, or the am I going to do a lip syncing? Am I going to do a short video? What am I going to do? What are the ideas? I'm going to 2 ideas or more that I'm going to combine with my music video, and start getting that idea that developed. Because this time on this final one, there isn't going to be a grace period where, okay, well, you didn't make the deadline, so you still can do it. If you don't get it done by that point, you're just not going to get it done. And if you do get it done, it's just going to be slapped together, and it's not going to be that good. So you really got to hit, everybody's, including myself, have to hit the deadlines for the rest of the semester, or just not going to make it. So think about that. And if you get time to explore some of these concepts that I talked about while you're editing your film, try them out and just get comfortable with it. Again, you need to play with this stuff to get more comfortable with it. The more you, just like the camera, just like everything we've talked about in this class, the more you do it, the better at it you get. There's that whole, you know, if you want to be a master at doing something, there's those 10,000 hours you got to put in. So even if you just want to be half master, well, that's 5,000 hours you got to put in. You want to be just decent at something, you probably got to put 1,000 or so hours in just to get it good. That's the bottom line with that and everything. Alrighty, so there you have it. Have a great weekend.